She thought no one would ever hear her story. But now you have. Subscribe to give voice to others like her. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 34 years old, and what I'm about to tell you will shake you to your core. Everyone thought I was just another corporate casualty, another woman who got pushed out when life got complicated. But they had no idea what was coming for them. It started on a Tuesday morning in March when I walked into the office of Meridian Tech, the software company where I'd poured my heart and soul for 8 years. I was their top sales director, the one who landed the biggest contracts, the one who made them millions. I was also 12 weeks pregnant with my first child, and I was about to discover just how little loyalty means in the corporate world. I remember sitting across from my boss, Marcus Webb, in his glass office overlooking the city. He had this fake smile plastered on his face, the kind that never reaches your eyes. "Sarah," he said, sliding a manila envelope across his desk, "we need to talk about your future here." My stomach dropped, and it wasn't morning sickness. I knew that tone, that envelope, that look. But I never thought it would happen to me. Not after everything I'd done for this company. Not after the sleepless nights, the missed family dinners, the weekends spent closing deals that kept their lights on. "We're restructuring the sales department," Marcus continued, his voice as cold as winter rain. "Your position is being eliminated." But what happened next left me speechless. As I sat there stunned, trying to process what was happening, Marcus leaned back in his chair and said something that would haunt me forever. "Look, Sarah, we both know this is for the best. You're pregnant now. You'll have other priorities. This job requires total dedication, and frankly, we can't afford to have someone who's going to be distracted." The room spun around me. 8 years of my life, of building relationships, of generating revenue, of being their golden child, and this is how it ended? Because I was carrying a child. Because I dared to have a life outside of their profit margins. I still remember the taste of bile in my mouth as I cleaned out my desk that afternoon. My colleagues avoided eye contact, probably relieved it wasn't them. The security guard who escorted me out, a man named Tony who I'd chatted with every morning for years, couldn't even look at me. I was invisible, erased, like I'd never existed. But here's what Marcus Webb and the entire board of Meridian Tech didn't know about me. What they couldn't have known, because they never bothered to ask about my life outside of sales figures and quarterly reports. My father wasn't just a small business owner like I'd mentioned in passing. He was David Chen, founder and CEO of Chen Industries, one of the largest private investment firms on the West Coast. I'd spent my entire adult life trying to make it on my own, refusing his help, determined to prove that I could succeed without the family name or fortune. I worked 60-hour weeks, lived in a tiny apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda, all because I wanted to earn everything myself. I wanted to be Sarah the saleswoman, not Sarah the rich man's daughter. That night, I sat in my car in the Meridian Tech parking lot, tears streaming down my face, one hand on my still flat belly. I thought about calling my father, but pride held me back. I thought about filing a lawsuit, but that would take years. I thought about finding another job, but who would hire a pregnant woman in tech sales? "Da quale momento tutto mudo para sempre?" I called my father. "Dad," I said, my voice cracking, "I need to tell you something." And for the first time in 8 years, I told him everything. About the pregnancy, about the firing, about Marcus Webb's disgusting comments. I expected sympathy, maybe some fatherly advice about moving forward. What I got instead was silence. Then, in a voice I rarely heard from my gentle, soft-spoken father, he said, "Give me their financial information, everything you know." The next few weeks were a blur of legal documents, financial investigations, and strategic planning. My father's team of analysts descended on Meridian Tech like forensic accountants from hell. What they found made my blood run cold and my heart race with possibilities I'd never imagined. Meridian Tech was hemorrhaging money. Their biggest client, the one I'd landed 3 years ago that accounted for 40% of their revenue, was about to jump ship. Their newest product line had critical security flaws that could bankrupt them if discovered. Their cash flow was a disaster, and they were living quarter to quarter, hoping no one would notice the house of cards they'd built. But what I discovered next destroyed me inside. Going through the financial records, I found something that made everything clear. Marcus Webb had been skimming money from client accounts, small amounts that wouldn't be noticed immediately, but over 3 years, it added up to nearly $2 million. He wasn't just a sexist pig who fired pregnant women. He was a criminal who's slowly killing the company I'd loved. My father presented me with an option that seemed impossible just months before. "We can buy them," he said simply. "They're desperate for capital, their stock is undervalued, and with what we know about their financial situation, we can get them for a fraction of what they're actually worth." The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. Chen Industries would make a payout offer that Meridian Tech couldn't refuse. Not a hostile takeover, but a rescue package dressed up as salvation. They'd get the capital injection they desperately needed, and I'd get something better than revenge. I'd get justice. O que vai na qual dia minha sombra e hoje. The day of the acquisition announcement, I stood in the lobby of Meridian Tech. 7 months pregnant, wearing a designer maternity suit that cost more than my old monthly salary. I watched through the glass walls as Marcus Webb addressed the staff about their exciting new partnership with Chen Industries. He had no idea. I was there. No idea that the woman he discarded like garbage was about to become his boss. No idea that every condescending word he'd spoken, every assumption he'd made about pregnant women and their priorities, was about to come back and destroy everything he'd built on lies and stolen money. When the meeting ended and employees began filing out, I walked into that same glass office where my life had been turned upside down 6 months earlier. Marcus looked up from his desk, and I watched his face go through every stage of recognition, confusion, and dawning horror. "Hello, Marcus," I said, settling into the chair across from his desk, the same chair where I'd been humiliated and discarded. "I'm Sarah Chen, your new CEO. The color drained from his face like water from a broken dam. "Sarah, I what ... how ... "Chen Industries," I said, placing my hands on my rounded belly. "My family's company now owns 73% of Meridian Tech, which means you work for me now. Or rather, you did work for me until about 30 seconds ago." What happened next was the most satisfying moment of my professional life. I slid a manila envelope across his desk, the same gesture he'd made to me months before. "Your position is being eliminated," I said, using his exact words. "We're restructuring the management team," but I wasn't done. The investigation into his embezzlement was already underway, led by the same forensic accountants who'd uncovered the company's financial problems. "Oh, and Marcus, the FBI will be here tomorrow morning. Seems there are some discrepancies in the client accounts you've been managing. Funny how these things come to light during acquisitions." As security escorted him out, the same Tony who'd walked me in my car months before, now wearing the biggest smile I'd ever seen, I stood at the window of what was now my office, watching the man who'd tried to destroy my career disappear into the parking garage. The next few months were a whirlwind of restructuring, rebuilding, and revenge served ice cold. I promoted 3 women to senior management positions, including Janet Rodriguez, a brilliant programmer who'd been passed over for advancement for years, I implemented a comprehensive maternity leave policy, the most generous in the industry. I made Meridian Tech the kind of company I wish I'd worked for all along. But the sweetest victory came 8 months after taking over, when I stood in the same conference room where I'd once pitched to clients, holding my 3-month-old daughter Emma, announcing that Meridian Tech had just landed the biggest contract in company history. The client, the same one who'd been planning to leave before the acquisition. The revenue from that single deal was more than Marcus Webb had stolen over 3 years. Emma slept peacefully in my arms as I presented the quarterly numbers that showed we'd not only recovered from near bankruptcy, but had become one of the most profitable tech companies in the region. Finalmente attendió que estaba contichendo all those months ago. It wasn't just about pregnancy discrimination or one man's prejudice. It was about a system that discards people the moment they become inconvenient, that sees human life as an obstacle to profit, that believes women can't be both mothers and leaders. Today, Emma is 2 years old, and she comes to the office with me sometimes. She has her own tiny chair in the conference room, and she babbles happily during board meetings. The same board that once approved my firing now votes unanimously on initiatives I propose, many of them focused on work-life balance and family support. Marcus Webb, he served 18 months in federal prison for embezzlement. His lawyers tried to plea bargain, claiming he'd been under financial stress, that his actions were aberrations. But the evidence was overwhelming, and justice, like pregnancy, has its own timeline. Last week, I received a letter from a woman named Jennifer Murphy. She'd been fired from her job at a marketing firm after announcing her pregnancy, and she'd heard about my story through mutual connections. She wanted advice, she said, about fighting back against discrimination. I called her immediately. Jennifer, I told her, they thought they were ending your story, but really they were just beginning it. The question isn't whether you'll recover from this. The question is whether they'll recover from what comes next. As I sit here now in the CEO office that was never supposed to be mine, looking out at a company that's thriving because it values people over profit, I think about that Tuesday morning in March when my world fell apart. I think about Marcus Webb's fake smile and his assumption that pregnancy would make me weak. Distracted, less than Dot, he was wrong about everything except one thing. I do have other priorities now. I prioritize justice over revenge, compassion over cruelty, and building something better over simply tearing down what came before. I prioritize showing my daughter that when the world tries to diminish you, you don't shrink to fit their expectations. You grow until their limitations become irrelevant. They fired me because I was pregnant, thinking that would be the end of my story. Instead, it was the beginning of theirs ending and mine truly starting. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's using that success to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. And Emma, she grew up in a world where pregnancy isn't a liability, where motherhood isn't seen as a career killer, where women don't have to choose between having children and having ambitions. She'd grow up knowing that sometimes the people who try to limit you end up liberating you in ways they never imagined possible. That's the real victory. Not just that I bought the company, but that I transformed it into something worthy of the future I'm building for her.